welcome to the Purvis Versus podcast. My name is Eric Purvis. I'm an RMT, course creator, continuing education provider, and advocate for evidence-based massage therapy. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my podcast. This is the second episode in my series on new RMTs. Today we have Courtney, who is an RMT in Halifax, Nova Scotia. In this episode, we have a great conversation about the need to adapt RMT entry to practice curriculum to make it consistent with current evidence and how the industry, and more importantly, the public, would benefit from a shift in thinking from fixing people to providing more meaningful support and management. Today, we have Courtney coming all the way from Halifax. So thanks for being here today. Courtney, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Great. I'm excited to have you here today. And I guess before we get started, just tell us a little bit about you. Who's Courtney? What are you all about?
Oh, goodness. That's a loaded question a little bit, isn't it? Yeah, I'm Courtney. I live in Halifax currently. I've had a little bit of a transient life. I've lived kind of all over Canada and a little bit of Asia, and just decided to settle in the Maritimes for a little bit and see what life is kind of all about here while I do my massage therapy diploma.
Nice. And you were saying that you are going just into your final term of school, of your program in Halifax.
Yeah.
And how's
term
that?
4 starting.
Yeah. Excited? Nervous?
Overwhelmed a little bit. I'm so excited to be done. So yes, excited. Definitely getting more and more excited as the weeks go on to get out of there and kind of get started.
Yeah, that's the way it always is for most of us. Most of us will remember that those last kind of term or two of school being just get it done, finish the course or finish the program. Let me do my licensing exam and let's just get on with life, because it's a lot of work,
Yes.
a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So congratulations on almost being there.
Thank you.
Exciting. So the reason that you're on today is I just remember correctly, we initially connected through Instagram. You sent me a message after you listened to an episode on the other podcast I do with my friend Jamie. Tell me a little bit about that episode. What do you remember, and what was it that triggered you to want to reach out to me?
To be honest, I don't really remember that episode, because since then, my sort of journey for knowledge has kind of gone all over the internet and all over the map. But kind of what got me started onto listening to you and seeking out more information about the massage therapy industry was after I had completed my first year of school. I felt like something was missing, or perhaps I was not getting the full story. There was something just felt a little bit amiss or a little bit out of alignment, and I couldn't quite figure out what that was. So I decided, okay, let me see what's happening in the world of massage therapy outside of what I'm learning within the walls of my program specifically. And that turned into a whole mind-blowing situation, because there's a lot that goes on in the world that isn't coming down the pipelines at school. So that led me to start doing my own research and to just start listening to the voices that exist in our industry out and about. For me, it's online, which is where I'm getting most of my information, podcasts and stuff like that. And yeah, that's what led me to you. I was looking for some answers, essentially.
When you're looking for answers, did you find that the more you learn, the more questions you had?
Oh my goodness, yes. Like every single thing I learned, there's now 100 more things that I don't know, which is overwhelming, but at the same time, at least makes me feel like, okay, there's a bit of a path here. If I just continue on this path, I can probably kind of get to know what it is that I'm looking for. But yes, definitely that at a very big level. I wasn't expecting that to be like, oh, okay, hold the phone here and let's just backtrack. Like it's not as black and white as it's made out to be. It's a very gray industry that I'm heading into.
I think it's so great that you're asking these questions now, and I think it's great. I mean, I really appreciate that you were able to listen to my other podcast and have asked questions so early in your educational journey, because that's not usually the norm. In my experiences, that usually people, are in school, they're inundated with information. It's this very linear process, which you kind of alluded to. And then maybe once you're out in the world and you start to see things that don't make sense, or you start to maybe, you talk to other colleagues, or maybe you take a course or something, and things just don't add up. That's usually when people start to ask questions. And I think it's harder to unlearn stuff once you've already had that knowledge established than it is like where you are, where you're like, after your first term or your first year of school, you're asking questions, you're thinking, I'm missing something, and that shows a lot of really critical thinking and skepticism, healthy skepticism, which I think is an important thing that should be fostered in all healthcare providers, particularly for us massage.
Yeah, I agree. I had gone to, this isn't my first school rodeo, so this is my fourth time actually attending post-secondary education. So I've kind of been here before and, gone in and just absorbing everything that's told to me from the instructors as they know and I know nothing. And in the past, I kind of learned like, oh, there might be some things here worth having a conversation about. And heading into this program, very similar. I was very health illiterate. I knew nothing really when it came to the body. If you had asked me how many bones are in, and I said, I've been like, I don't know, 30, like I had no clue. And sort of a similar situation. These people know all this stuff that I don't, but then some things just kind of started not really making a ton of sense to me specifically, which then made me start to question. And my classmates are like, yeah, but they know. And I'm like, but do they know? Like, or maybe they only know one sort of aspect of whatever it is that we're talking about, or that. So yeah, it's important to me to kind of think outside of what people are just sort of feeding you. I also come from a marketing background. So that was my last job, was in marketing, just kind of, selling stuff and essentially trying to persuade how people think, both in the communication realm. And that's what I kind of felt like was happening here. I was like, I feel like this is what I used to do. This feels like a little bit of a marketing ploy. I mean, I'm being sold things, but I'm not being given the sort of backup resources on how we landed to these conclusions and around the modalities. I have so many why. I'm like, why? And I couldn't get any answers. So yeah, it was that little piece where I was like, what's being sold to me exactly and why? So then I had to kind of get out and dig around.
That is so interesting to me that you felt like you're being sold something. I've never heard that before, but when you say that, that is so true. That really resonates with me, that oftentimes when we are learning, particularly when you're learning all the different modalities and all the different stories and narratives behind them, you are being sold something, and it's just a belief. Like it's like a just because thing. And if you ask questions, ask why, then there's never really a good answer. That's such a way. So I like that. Mark, you're being sold.
That's exactly how I felt. Yeah, and that is what it sort of felt like, and especially in and around the modalities. Just for an example, like we were learning joint mobs, like joint mobilizations at one point, and it's these 4 grades, and if you do it at this grade versus this grade, we are doing this versus this, and it's a 1 second time difference between the two. And I'm like, so you're telling me if I do this for 1 second longer, it's going to have this much of an effect? Like, where are we getting this information from? But then there was no backup to it. It was just kind of like, this is just how it is. Just do it. And let's move along and not talk about it. I was like, wait, I want to talk about it. Like, I want to know how we got here. So
yeah,
I'm my own worst enemy.
Yeah. And that's so great. So I love this. Let's keep going. Let's talk about this stuff here. This is really interesting to me. What was the response though when you asked? Like, if you said, "Hey, like, why? If I do it 1 second longer, like, what did your teachers say when you were questioning them on what they were teaching you?"
Well, it happens often, and it has continued to go on. And the class that I come from, there's a lot of questions all the time. And they are often just sort of brushed, like just kind of oversaw it, like brush it away quickly and move along, which then made me feel even more, wait a second, though, like if we can't even have this conversation about where we're getting this information from, or it'd be like, oh, that's just from the textbook, which is the Rattray textbook. Right. Yeah.
So people can't see. I'm shaking my head here.
Yeah.
I can't. It surprises me that book is so. That book was written in the '90s or maybe 2000. The book is so old and
Yeah.
so outdated that
Yeah.
in some provinces it's still used, and in many provinces it seems like most people I talk to in the currently unregulated provinces, that is like the textbook, which is
It is.
awful.
It provides the foundation for the entire program, essentially, at least when it comes to the manual therapy courses where they're teaching us the modalities and stuff like that. It's all coming out of there with a little bit of sprinkling from other resources, which I don't even really know what they are because they don't really tell us. But most of, yes, is from that book. So once I learned that, how old the book was, it just made me question everything a little bit more. Because I'm like, okay, hang on a second here. So this that we're learning is from that, but we don't, going back to the joint mobs, I'm like, we don't have an answer for this. We don't have an answer for how one is corrective one way and how the other way is not. And if we do it for this time, it's this. And if we do it for that time, it's that. And it was just very much that's just how it is. Just do it like that and move along. Because there's too much stuff to learn. Like the amount of content that comes down the pipelines is wild. So it's very much just hold your questions for later and we'll not answer them type thing.
It's pretty overwhelming, isn't it, when you're learning all that stuff and you have to just drink that information in, and then if you have questions about it as well and they don't want to answer it, that must be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, yes, very frustrating. And it took me a minute to even figure out who and what I was frustrated at, because at the beginning, I thought, why would the school be teaching us this stuff if we don't have sort of the evidence behind it, if we're using these resources that are so outdated and et cetera, et cetera. But then, the more I kind of dug around and the more I learned about how our industry works, I realized, okay, it's not the school. Like they're training us to be able to pass these board exams, which we need to do to work. And they're simply providing us the knowledge that we're going to be tested on, which is all good and fine. But then what does that do for us and the public as manual therapists once we get out? I don't feel like I'm not sure we're being trained to treat the people in front of us as opposed to just kind of get through these exams, which I think is a big disservice to both us as massage therapists and how we could develop in these 2 years that we spend, and to the people that we're going to be treating. Because I now feel, for me anyways, that once I finish this program and just get it done, I've got a year of unlearning to do while I'm relearning, which I wonder, could that be integrated somewhere into the program so that we could be coming out feeling a little bit more prepared to be dealing with the people that are in front of us rather than just the pathologies and pretty much the pathologies that are coming in, which are attached to humans, but we don't treat it like such at school. We treat the pathologies as if they're their own thing. And then the person is also is separate, which is interesting.
And that's a really good observation to make too. And that's a really good point. We could probably talk about that a little bit more. Is that when your focus of your education is on treating these, I'm going to say they're perceived pathologies, because everything is like you're looking for a dysfunction. You're looking to find the reason for the person's pain. You're looking for these very causal explanations. Oh, you have pain because you've got scoliosis. You got pain because you've got hyperlordosis. You got pain because you've got tension, or like you look for all these different reasons. And then we're taught to assess or palpate to find these things. And then we're supposed to address it with this kind of recipe-based approach, and the person's supposed to get better. And the thing that drives me crazy about all that is, like you said, we're not really treating the person, we're treating a piece of meat. We're making a lot of assumptions about why they hurt. And the thing that I always come back to is that so say somebody has a scoliosis and maybe maybe they have got low back pain, but maybe it has nothing to do with that. We don't know.
Right.
right? But we're always looking to blame something, to find something, right? Or maybe somebody's got, a headache, and or they've got shoulder pain, and we're doing all of our assessment, and we're doing all our, we're supposed to be looking for postural changes and all this stuff, and we're trying to correct it. And what happens if we do all that stuff and the person doesn't feel better? Then what are we left with? We're left searching for another reason, another explanation for it. And it just leads us down this long kind of pathway of chasing ghosts that
Right.
is missing on the person. And this is something I think about all the time. I'll probably talk about this on a podcast by myself, but we'll touch on it now. Is that if you were just taught as a student that, what, natural history is really important. If people hurt, they're probably going to get better. But maybe rather than trying to blame something or find something for them, maybe what we do is we just listen to them. We validate their concerns. We find out what they want from that treatment that day. We make them feel better. And if we've ruled out any nasties, any red flags or anything, then we just give them a beautiful massage, give them some things to do on their own, and just make them feel reassured, right? Maybe if
Yeah.
the person's got some pain that's been persisting for a long time, maybe there's some other reasons for that. Maybe there's not. But I think there's a
Yeah.
big danger. The biggest danger, this is a pretty bold statement. The biggest danger we have as a profession is by chasing these body part dysfunctions where we're looking for something, like you said, like in the
Right.
clinical massage therapy textbook. It doesn't talk about the person. It talks about the body part and how to treat that body part. But why don't we just treat the person who then is experiencing pain in that body part? Flipping that script would
Right.
be something you said. Could this be done in the school? Yes, this could be done in the education system. It totally could be. It would just require that changing that mindset of how people were taught. But you could still do a lot of the same things. You just kind of change the story and understanding about it, and you focus less on all the structural garbage which we don't need to know about.
Yeah. Huge focus on that kind of stuff. Not a lot of focus on therapeutic relationships and really how to deal with the people in front of us who are coming to us because they are in pain most of the time. And exactly like you said, then we go on chasing these causes of what's causing them this pain, whereas we're only taught from a biological framework. So you could imagine we're going to be chasing forever doing that, without taking into consideration what else is going on in this person's life. How is their mental health, like just all the things that could be happening outside of what is exactly going on in like the musculoskeletal system, which then makes me think too, we're creating a situation then where our clients or patients are dependent on us because they're like, okay, they're going to figure it out. They're going to find what's wrong with me. Whereas, I mean, maybe I'll feel differently in 5 years when I'm working, but right now I have no clue. I have no clue what's wrong with you. Or, I can take a guess based on what I've been taught, but really I have absolutely no idea what's going on. So now we're both, except you're paying a pile of money for us to kind of run around in these circles. And is it effective? I don't know. I want to say no off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I would say that it's so unpredictable. And that's the thing, right? Is if the way that we were taught, and if the way that I'm going to say majority people in our profession, and not just massage, but in the MSK professions, think, if we thought purely in these kind of structural, biomechanical ways as being the rationale or the cause of all pain, then people wouldn't hurt, because you
Right.
would go and see someone and they would fix it and then they would get better. So we know that pain is way more complex than that. Yet there seems to be this, I mean, there's a big allure to, if somebody comes in, they hurt, finding a reason for it, you give them a treatment and they feel better. And you've like, I fixed them. There's like this God complex.
Yeah.
It feels amazing, of course. But and sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes people come in, you do a treatment, they're like, oh, it feels great. The fixed my spot or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, I don't know what I did. You didn't fix anything, but they felt better. But that's a very attractive feeling that a lot of people have. But I think like you were alluding to is if we don't know, because pain is so complex, and there needs to be a little bit of humility, and say, look, I don't know, I don't have the answers, but what I do know is I can at least do something that's probably not going to make you feel worse.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe there is a bio reason for the pain. Maybe they do have some kind of systemic arthritic condition. Maybe they've got lupus. Maybe they have, some metastasis. Maybe they're just really suffering with a lot of things going on in their life, and their whole system is ramped up, and they're hurting. We don't know.
Mhm.
It's not for us to judge. It's just, I think, for us to try and make them feel better. And that's where I feel that we as a profession can really succeed, is by if we can just make people feel better and not worry about all this other stuff, be able to recognize when something doesn't seem right. For the most part, just find ways to interact with the person, make them feel better, would be such a better way to be educated. And in a 2-year program, you could probably do a pretty good job of that without having to learn all this stuff that you're going to have to unlearn, or going to want to unlearn once you get out.
Yeah. Yeah. The sort of the cellular details of, various systems, super cool, but struggling to figure out how exactly this is going to help me out in the world. You know what I mean? Like, what does this cell secrete to do this, whatever? I'm like, where are we using this exactly? Because I can't see it. I just can't see how this is relating to that. But then, like you said, we have no discussions about how to make a client or a patient feel validated in their pain, or in whatever it is that they're coming in for that day that they're experiencing, even if they're just stressed, or, their mental health is not super great that day. Like, we're not taught how to have those conversations, to just listen, for one, without interjecting all of what we think we should do to you to make you feel better. And yeah, too, just being able to hold that space to validate somebody, especially in, the healthcare system that exists these days in Canada, where it's just so wild. You can't get in to see a doctor. It's just so challenging in all the pieces. And yet we now, I think, have this opportunity to help there. Just in doing that, making somebody feel like we care a little bit, as opposed to just coming at them with our internal biases and be like, this is how we are going to fix you. Yeah, it's interesting. And I feel like that's a thing that should be changed in what we're doing
I
somehow.
100%
I don't know
agree with you.
how.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Some of the work I've been doing with some other schools is we're looking at curriculum updates or curriculum changes, and I am very comfortable that if you had a full faculty that was on board with the stuff, that's how it would change, right? You could easily put the stuff into the curriculum, but change is hard, and it's slow, and it takes a buy-in from not just the school owners, but all the administrative staff, the faculty, to implement it. So it is possible. It's just it's a lot of work that most people don't want to do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And they have alluded to that a little bit at my school, the amount of work that it would take to update the curriculum, essentially, even just as small as, course notes on whatever, something could be a bit outdated, and what they're using in it is like, okay, don't pay attention to that statistic, it's not relevant anymore. And my thought is, why is it in here then? Like, why aren't we changing it? And it comes back around to that the amount of time and effort and work that would go into doing that, and then getting the whoever it is that oversees those types of things, whether it be the college or the associations or what have you, I don't really know. But having that all done, they allude to the fact that it would just be too much work. I'm like, okay, that would be an investment. You would have to take that time out and invest in doing this. But in the long run, wouldn't that investment be beneficial, not just to us and our education, but to the people that we're treating?
Really, we owe it to the public, right? Everything you're doing as a healthcare provider is you're supposed to be working in the public's best interest, and we're supposed to be working
Right.
within giving them basically informed consent to treatment. And if we are giving them stories that are based on belief systems or based on no science, and we tell people that the reason you hurt or what we're going to do today is this, and this is why, because we're releasing this tissue or rebalancing this, or you're giving them these stories, and those stories don't have evidential support behind them, then we're actually not, the person's not giving informed consent, because they're actually giving consent for you to do something to them based on falsehoods. And
Right.
I think that's something that we need to ask ourselves as a profession, and schools need to ask themselves, associations, colleges need to start asking themselves those questions and say, we're all here for the public's best interest. That's why we exist. So we have to be very mindful of the information that the students are getting, that current members of the profession are getting, that the public is getting, because it's wrong. So much of it is just blatantly wrong.
Yeah.
And I would say the price of inaction is way greater than the price of action. You know, when we're looking across the board at not just students, what they're learning, but the public and the profession as a whole, by doing nothing, I think it's a big problem. It's a big problem. This is something I've been going on about for years now, and you know, some people are starting to listen, but we need more people talking about this stuff, which is why we're talking about it today on the podcast.
Yeah.
And we have these conversations.
To the folks who I go to school with, you know, we come into these education systems and we expect that the people who are teaching us are using, you know, kind of the current research and et cetera, et cetera. And we don't do a lot of work diving into it. And we need to, as the students, because as I'm learning here, you never know. You just kind of never know what can be coming down the pipelines. But yeah, exactly like you said, where it's just kind of blatantly wrong, some of the stuff. And my class is big. I have almost 50 people in my class. And yeah, it's huge. And they'll, for example, like a modality, the frictions modality. This is what it does. This is why we do it. We break up scar tissue, like just very matter of fact. This is what it does, and this is how it works, and this is why we're doing it, without any thoughts on this is how it used to be. This is how the evidence is kind of saying now that it may or may not, or whatever. And now you have, well, aside from me and a couple of my friends who I'm like, guys, guess what? Like, there's some information out there that we have to read. You've got 45 people who are believing this stuff like it's Bible. And then they turn around and go into clinic and they're like, okay, to the public, this is what we're going to do. And this is why, because it does this, 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 and this. Now you're dependent on me because I'm the only person who knows this, how to do it. So you have to come and see me. And it's not true. And I'm just standing there like, oh my goodness, this creates a really big ripple effect in a problematic way. And if nobody's challenging these thoughts that we're like cementing these biases, that we're cementing this early on, if that's not being challenged as soon as we get out of school, where does that leave us in like 5 or 10 years, just doing the same ineffective thing over and over and over again, coming back around to, client-centered care? That doesn't feel like it's it. And yes, that's what they told us at the beginning of school too. Like this is all for the person who's in front of you, the safety and treatment and whatever. And I'm like, is that what we're doing though? If this is what we're doing. So yeah, it can put you in a really confusing spot as a student.
Oh yeah, I totally agree, and that is frustrating because they talk, like you said, they talk about this client-centered care, but then that's just words, because what you're taught in action is not client-centered care. And I would assume, tell me if I'm wrong, that when you guys do your initial intakes, or when you do your kind of interviews and assessments, you probably just go through a list of yes/no questions, right, to kind of tick off boxes. Is that pretty common, or do you ever approach it from a more open-ended discussion framework?
Well, recently I've kind of changed my own personal approach as to how to go about this, just based on what I'm thinking and sort of learning. But no, the way that they teach you to do it is they give you a script, like quite literally what to say, and then yes, go through these checks and just make sure you've checked them all off. And sort of the very first question that we ask is, what brings you in? Like, what brings you here? And what are your goals for today's treatment? But that has become such a non-important factor in our checklist of things to ask, where I'm like, wait a sec, though. That, to me, I think should be one of the most important things, is what are your goals as the person or the client to get out of this treatment? Like, what do you want to get from being here with me? And how can we facilitate that, as opposed to what's wrong with you and framing it in that narrative, what's wrong, because maybe there's nothing wrong. And how can we fix it? Which I'm like, I don't know about that. I'm just not sure.
And that's a really good point to make, because so often, clinically, right, what happens is people will come in, and if we just ask them, say, hey, what can we do for you today? What brings you in? And they may, and then they may just be like, I just want to feel good. I just want a massage. I'm stressed out. Can I just like hang out? Or, oh yeah, I got this little thing in my shoulder. Can you just work on that? It's not too bad. But if and so that way you're like, okay, so nothing serious. We just want to find some touch and some movement, some things that makes it feel good. Great, let's do that. Versus if we say, well, tell me what's wrong, and then then they're like, oh, well, I need to come up with a reason for why I'm here. So then that's oftentimes, at least in my experiences and talking to others too, is that will result in people being like, well, yeah, my shoulder's bugging me. Okay. And then then the therapist will zoom in on the shoulder, and then they'll start doing all this stuff. And then once that's done, then maybe they get them on the table, they start doing some stuff to them, and the person maybe doesn't want that, but they feel compelled. Like the amount of times I heard from clients say that they felt like compelled to just go along with the treatment because the therapist really wanted to do that to them.
Yeah.
Hundreds of times I probably heard that over my, all the years working in the clinic. And that was always really surprising to me, that how many people just were never listened to.
Yeah. I can kind of see why, though. Now we're not taught how to actively listen and, how to actively hear what somebody's trying to tell us without interjecting our own whatever onto them. And even on that, I've just started talking to people, and, I'd spoken to a few people about how they don't even feel that there's a space for them in coming to massage therapy, especially in the more clinical settings, outside of a physio's or out of a physio office or a chiropractor or whatever it may be, because they said, because there's nothing actually wrong with me. I don't have an injury, but I'm seeking, massage therapy to whatever, calm my nervous system, help with my mental health, just to feel good. But then they feel like they can't go to these places. And that really broke my heart, because it was like, that's the opposite of what we are trying to do, in my opinion, as healthcare practitioners. Like, now you're feeling that you can't even come to us because you're not broken enough. Like, what's that?
Yeah, you need to have something severely wrong in order to validate your reason for treatment. Yeah, and that's a big issue, because I think what we do have as massage is we can play both sides. Like, we can be there in that kind of more orthopedic MSK realm if you want to, or we can also just provide just a space for people to feel amazing.
Yeah.
And there's value in both of those, depending on what the person wants and depending on the therapist. Yeah. And that's a thing that I see oftentimes in our profession, is that we don't value enough I'm going to say the softer side of care. There tends to be a value a lot more on the, fixing orthopedic musculoskeletal focus, and not enough on like, well, maybe this person just needs some type of support today. They need some type of, they need, or they require me today to be some part of their kind of self-management regime, because maybe they live with a chronic disease or a chronic pain condition of some kind. And if we just hold that safe space for them and just find a way to make them feel good, maybe it's just a simple like relaxation type massage. There's value to that. But oftentimes what you see in our profession is you see that people don't assign value to that because it's uncomplicated.
Right.
And we need to flip that script too, and that there's a lot of value in just making people feel good.
And aren't there a lot of, I don't know exactly because I haven't done a ton of research on my own into this, but I've seen a few studies about that, like just the benefits alone of being heard and feeling validated and having a safe space where you're comfortable to share what you're actually feeling. That how therapeutic just that alone can be before we even put our hands on anybody. Which, yeah, not super complicated, but wow, like if that's, if that is how it is, why aren't we integrating that a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of evidence out there that shows that just people being heard, and you have it from the qualitative literature. There's stuff, and as well as there's patient experiences, people that live with chronic conditions, and if you ask, I've done lots of interviews with them over the years too, the people that live with chronic pain, and just being heard and validated, and just being like made to feel like they're okay is very valuable to them. And I don't think as a profession we value that as much as we could. And I'm speaking in generalizations here. A lot of people that are listening to this probably like, no, I do that all the time. A lot of us do, but a lot of us don't as well. And so it's important to have these conversations, I think. This is great here, Courtney. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I wanted to kind of go back, just rewind a little bit to kind of some of the stuff about the faculty and your students, your classmates. You said that you've asked questions why, and you're not really getting answers. Have you ever brought evidence, or whether it's podcasts or websites or research papers, to your instructors or to your classmates and said, "Hey, can we have a conversation about this?"
No. There was one conversation that I had recently with an instructor and a friend of mine, and it was about manual lymph drainage because we were learning, I don't remember what we were learning, but we were learning something at that time that I think whiplash. Yeah, we were on to whiplash, and for acute whiplash, that this is how it's going to be, and this is what you're going to do, and this very like specified map of the face and the neck essentially, and to follow it in this very specific order to achieve these results. And we're working with your partner. You're always working with partners in this program. So the instructor comes over and we started asking him like, how though, where is the literature that to show us that this is going to be effective, and that this very specific routine essentially of how you're going to go up and down the face and around the neck and all this kind of stuff, how does this specific routine lead us to what you're saying? And he basically just said he doesn't know, and that's just what the textbook says. And my friend, who him and I now talk a lot about this kind of stuff, what we're being taught versus we critically think a lot, I should say. And it just came back to, it's kind of circled around a little bit and back to the instructor saying, well, there's no evidence to a lot of what we do. And then that was kind of the end of the conversation. And we find that these conversations aren't really like up and open for discussion. And because, at the end of the day, what I'm looking to do out of this program is graduate, and these people are going to be marking my exams at the end, that it's kind of become, okay, just play the game and then get out and then learn, sadly. But that's kind of how we feel, or how I should say how I feel. I shouldn't speak for other people. But how I feel, just sort of play the game. Don't ask too many questions and then get out and do the work yourself. But no, I haven't brought specifically to them, here's this evidence based on this. Can we have a discussion about that?
I mean, realistically, that's not your job. That's their job, right? They're the faculty. They're the ones getting paid. They're the one that should be bringing that stuff to you and said, "Hey, let's have a conversation. Do you guys want to have let's critically think about these papers?"
Yeah.
For example, on like manipulating fascia. There's a bunch of papers out there where this shows that you can't actually change the structure of fascia with your hands. Does that mean that those techniques don't provide some level of symptomatic relief? That's not what it says at all. But it says that the reason why is not why you think it is. And that's a big thing that you see a lot with these modality conversations is MLD, for example. It doesn't do what it says it does. There's no evidence to show. It's based on experiences, and it's based on these hypotheses that these people come up with, and they do a thing and they get some type of result, and they're like, oh, maybe it's because of this. And they kind of bring some anatomy or physiology into it. But that to me would be such a fantastic learning moment for students. If the instructors came in and said, I know we're teaching you X, Y, and Z modality. X, Y, and Z for American listeners, modality or intervention. And this is how we're taught. But here's some research which is questioning that. Let's have a conversation. What do you guys think? That would be such a fantastic way to kind of create that critical thinking and skepticism, which is healthy. And that's what, and you're saying that that's just not even an option. That doesn't even happen.
No,
yeah.
No.
It's almost discouraged. Would you say it's almost discouraged?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's sort of this it's almost like this hidden, it feels like there's some sort of weird thing going on where it's like gatekeeping, that we're just going to have gatekeep this information back here. If we just don't tell them, they just won't know, and they'll just do what we're telling them to do and go on. And I don't know if that's actually like that, but that's how I feel sort of about the situation, because it is discouraged. Don't think too much. Do anything too much. Yeah, totally. Just do it, and do it exactly the way that they've shown it as well. So we spend a lot of time watching demos of stuff, how to treat this, that, or the other thing. So like scoliosis, that was a recent one. Watching a 40-minute demo on how to treat scoliosis, and then do it. And then when we're tested on it, it's essentially how well we can replicate that recipe, which I don't know. Yeah.
Everybody that comes to see you is not going to be the same. And every therapist
it's not going to present. Exactly. Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
And that's my thought. I'm like, okay, so if this person, I'm like, it's not the same for every single person. So how can we say that you're going to do the exact same treatment for everyone? That was, just another thing where it just kind of didn't make sense to me. I'm like, wait a sec though. That doesn't make sense to just do this recipe on every single person. Where in their healing journey are they? How are they feeling? Like there's so many things that we kind of don't discuss, but it's a recipe, follow the recipe, regurgitate it, and that's it, which to me is also a missed opportunity, because we're not actually learning a lot of this stuff. It's memorize it and spit it back out. And because there's just so much that they jam into these 2 years, there's no way. So by the time you get to the end of the year, you can't remember the first 3 months of what you learned.
It's all rote-based. It's memorization, rote-based learning. It's interesting that what happens though, and the way you describe it is how I learned, almost 20 years ago when I first went to massage school, and we used the same textbook then as we do now. We there was never any research papers ever brought in. It was all textbook based, recipe based, instructor bias, whatever they liked, that's what you learned.
Yes.
And the instructors that you liked the best are kind of how you emulated your treatments on, because you're like, oh, I like him or I like her and I like how they do these things, and you just learn a style, so to speak, I guess would be the way, rather than learning how to think. But really, I mean, the way I think of it is when we learn these modalities and you don't question it, right? It's just you're taught this thing and this is what you do. It's really it's kind of like it's like faith-based knowledge. Don't ask, just do. Or like some type of like ancestral kind of passed down from generation to generation to generation of like, well, this is why we do things, this is how we do things. You're like, why? Don't ask. But I want a reason for it. This is because this is the way we've always done things. Okay, but is that the best, or is that correct? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
oftentimes no, right? But this faith-based kind of stuff is, personally, I think has no place in healthcare. You can teach people how to do the techniques, but maybe encourage them to think differently or maybe to explore, right? That's what I always talk about in the courses and things I do is like, be curious, explore, find out what works. What do you like to do? What do they
Yeah.
like to do?
Yeah. And I wonder too, like exactly sort of on that. It's that I find the narratives around the modalities and what they're teaching us to be what is the problematic piece. So if you want me to do myofascial release, cool, no problem. You like that? Somebody likes that? That feels good to you? No problem. We can do that. You know what I mean? But then when it comes into this whole conversation about how we release this tissue that's, that connects these two layers and all this sort of stuff. And if we hold it for this long, it will like unhook and melt the fascia underneath and da da da. I'm like, are we just lying to everybody though? Like if that's sort of the case, you know what I mean? And creating something out of nothing to a degree for probably only our benefit as manual therapists versus, hey, I really like when you do this and basically just like a dry technique without any lotion and like pull the skin. Can do. If that feels nice to you, no problem. You know what I mean? But yeah, there's the stories that are created around the whole, a lot of them, which I'm not sold.
Yeah. Well, and the question comes too is that if there's all these different stories for things that look and feel very similar,
Yeah, that.
how is one right and one wrong? Which one's correct and which one's wrong? How do we know? I mean, you can have 6 different techniques which all kind of look and feel similar, but they all have 6 different stories about how they function or how they, exert their effect on people. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And we just start asking those questions. We start challenging those things, as best we can. Because if you go to somebody that we will use myofascial. That's the background I came from, was this very structural myofascial. And I was like, that's what I'm doing. I'm melting tissue and I'm realigning things. And then I started looking at the research and I started realizing clinically after a few years that things didn't make sense. I was like, why am I believing this stuff? I just didn't question it, full open honesty. I just didn't question it until I started to question it. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And that kind of led me, amongst of other series of things, led me down my path I'm in now. But when one of the first things I realized was there's only so many different ways you can push, pull, and twist the skin. And why does every time we do it have a different story?
Right.
People get craniosacral therapy, people get myofascial therapy, people get trigger points, people get Swedish, and they all report, clinicians that subscribe to that way of thinking, they all get results.
Right.
People come back, they feel better, they report better outcomes. So, okay, we're never, ever going to dispute your clinical experience. But how come if you're doing this technique, say craniosacral, and it looks like a very specific way, and I do a technique which looks kind of similar, maybe a little bit different, but I'm saying I'm releasing very specific fascial lines, and both people report better outcomes, and I feel like I've done a good job with the person, then how am I right and you're wrong, or how are you wrong and I'm right, or vice versa? It doesn't make any sense. I think, I would love if every RMT student asked their instructors that question and see what kind of response they got, because I think that would be another great way to get these kind of critical thinking kind of discussions, rather than just memorize it, just don't ask questions. No, you need to learn. You need to ask those questions because they don't make sense. And so for patients, what I often say is, and I in these courses I teach, I do the same thing. I'm like, do you like the swimming technique? Swedish. Do you like the slow, stretchy skin technique, which we call fascia? Or do you like, do you like a pokier technique in some sore spots, which some people might want to call trigger points? Do you want like a broad technique or like a heavier technique, which maybe some people would call deep tissue? What do you want? What feels best to you? And everyone's going to have their thing, or maybe a combination of all of the above. Great. Then we're just going to give you this smorgasbord of different stuff and just give you a big, crazy old sensory experience and see what happens. I don't know. And there's reason, and there is, and this is the thing that's crazy too, is that there is a lot of research evidence out there that suggests or lets us know how touch exerts its effects, like how it decreases or can decrease noxious stimuli, and how it can impact the transmission of the nociceptive system, and how it can create not just analgesic, but there can be this kind of whole like connection and mental health stuff that happens with pleasant touch. And those are stories and explanations, narratives that are defensible.
Mm.
You could bring that easily into the massage curriculum, no problem.
Absolutely. And why not? Why not? You know what I mean? Especially if we do have that science to back it up. Like, why aren't we transitioning towards that a little bit and away from these faith-based modalities where they're essentially all kind of the same? We're kind of doing the same stuff with different names and for different timings and within seconds of each other. And some of them, 30 to 60 seconds here, 60 to 90 over here. And it's like, show me where we're getting that, what's happening in that extra 30 seconds, and show me where you're getting this information. I'm not buying it.
Well, it's funny. I read somewhere, and I can't think of the reference off the top of my head. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But looking at, so when we're doing manual techniques, one of the proposed mechanisms for why people hurt less is you activate is it Ruffini corpuscles? Might have an anti-nociceptive effect at the level of the spinal cord, and those respond to skin stretch.
Okay.
So you put a stretch or pull into the skin, as long as that itself is not overly noxious, it can slow down that transmission of noxious stimuli from the tissues to the spinal cord through a neurophysiological mechanism. I read somewhere, and I wish I knew the reference off the top of my head, that is about its most effect after about 60 to 90 seconds.
Okay.
Nobody quote me on that. Someone's probably going to listen and tell me I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But I remember reading it, I think, well, that's exactly like the fascial narrative.
Right.
Or a lot of these other ones, it's like, hold it for at least this length of time, because then that's when things release. And you're like, well, maybe you hold it that length of time because through experiential learning, they found that that's when people had the most pain relief.
Right. Yeah.
We have a proper neurophysiological explanation for why people maybe felt less pain versus, made up story.
Right.
And really interesting stuff, I find.
Yeah. And even on that note, most of, as it would seem, what we're kind of talking about and leading to is pain. People are coming to us because a lot of the time they're in pain for whatever reason. And that was actually partly sort of what led me to massage therapy, is that I have chronic pain and have lived with it for probably 15 years now, and I couldn't figure it out. And I just wanted to know why it was happening. And I would go and see all different massage therapists, chiropractors, like all the people, and I couldn't get an answer, basically. So at a point where when I was looking to change my career because I didn't like what I was doing before, I thought, this is the time for it. There's no discussion of pain science in school at all. And so I started diving into that world, and then quickly took my toes back out because I was like, oh boy, that's a whole other beast that I need to just be fully present for when I'm done learning all this stuff, and then can dive into that, because it seemed like a lot. But I just can't help but wonder, why aren't we talking about this at all in school? Yeah. And what you were just explaining, like how people's receptors and stuff can be affected by this, or like there hasn't been a single chat about it in a year and a half, which is interesting to me.
It's insane, isn't it? It's actually completely illogical when you ask that question. What's the number? And in the courses I teach on, the pain courses I teach, because that's my main area of interest, is understanding pain, and particularly chronic pain. And like we started off with this recording, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. You think you have some answers, and then you take a detour this way, and you think, okay, I don't know anything. But that's okay. We keep learning and trying to be less wrong every day, and that's all we can ask. But it's the question I always ask is, what's the number one reason why people come to see a massage therapist? Pain. They hurt.
Yeah.
What's number one reason why anybody will go see some type of MSK therapist? Pain. And it's usually pain, and it's impacting their quality of life. It's stopping them from doing something that is meaningful or valuable, important to them. So if pain is the number one reason why people come to see us, why is that something we learn almost zero about? It doesn't make any sense. It's completely illogical. That the science of pain, at least if students could understand that pain's really freaking complex, and there's a lot of different things involved with it. There's some different presentations of what it might look like. There's some different sensory mechanisms which might provide us some understanding of why or why not. Maybe learn some different, chronic pain type of conditions, like maybe fibromyalgia, or different types of arthritic conditions, and those things, how those things can, I don't know what the right word is, sensitize, is that the right word? How those things can influence, I should say, probably rather than sensitize, how those things can influence the person's nociceptive system and their experience of pain, blah blah blah. You go into all that stuff. If that was like the focus, if that was like your meat and potatoes, like your basic, here's your thing, and you based everything else off of that, it would be brilliant. That the profession, I think, would be where I envision, where I want us to be. We would be leaders in the MSK pain world, because our foundation would be based on pain, and we, at the very least, would be less wrong every day.
Right.
It would be okay.
Yeah. Versus where we're at here, where I don't know, pain is just sort of like this thing that we don't talk about. The only time we talk about it is in a pain scale that you're developing with somebody, 1 to 10. I'm like, that doesn't cover it. Like that's not enough for what this experience is in this person's body, and how we can help them. Yeah. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre.
It doesn't make any sense, does it? It doesn't make any sense. And I ask myself this question all the time, and I'm like, nobody has an answer.
No, and then we're left, well, I feel anyways, like there's this whole huge piece of what we do, which is dealing with people's pain, that we know nothing about. So I feel like there's this gaping hole in sort of my learning that's just sitting there, empty, being like, what about us? Like fill us up over here. You know what I mean? But for me, I've just deduced it. That's a later thing that I will have to learn on my own and gather that knowledge. But I don't know. It definitely seems like something we should be touching on.
For sure.
And especially if there's a pile of theories about it and whatever that might look like. I haven't dug too deep into it because it feels overwhelming right now to me. But yeah, at least bring it up a little so that we know that there exists a world of study that looks into pain, so that we can, if we want to, and I feel like most of us should want to, since we are dealing with pain every single day, take some time to kind of dive down those alleys and see what's available there that we could use in our practice. But
it would be very logical. I go to school for 2 years to learn how to help you with pain, yet I learn nothing about pain.
Yeah.
What? So right. It's we can talk about that forever. Yeah. It's just crazy to me, and it's so great that I'm very inspired listening to you, Courtney, and as a student, and obviously you've had other, like, you've lived with chronic pain for 15 years. You've had other schooling, you had other education, so you've probably come into the program at a different part in your life with different experience. Yeah. A lot of people, but I still think it's great that you're asking these questions, and it sounds like there's been a few people in your class that have, you can share some of your frustrations and discussions with.
Yeah, and I mean, like, once I first started learning, I was like, hold on a second here, and I would go to my closest friends at school, and I'm like, guys, check this out, like, listen to this. Or listen to this. And they're like, you're so annoying. Like, as if we don't have enough to worry about right now with just learning this. You're coming at us with this, like, information from out there that's totally contradicting what we're learning in here. And I'm like, but it's important. And so we're even starting to have those discussions in the classrooms a little bit, you know what I mean? But they do get blanketed by frustration. You gotta have to work through that first step of figuring out it's not school. I mean, it is the school, but it's the whole system and how it's structured right now. But it is cool to be kind of having these conversations, because they weren't happening in the first couple semesters. It was in the start of the second year that it's sort of, wait a sec, let's talk about this and let's think about this critically. If you told me that this piece of tissue has the tensile strength to hold an elephant, but then you're also telling me that I can break up adhesions in it by rubbing my finger along it, like those two things don't align. You know what I mean? So let's talk about that for a little bit. And it has sparked these conversations amongst me and my classmates, which I think is great for us, that we are open to having these conversations, and before these biases get cemented too deeply in our practices and how we're working eventually, that we can be open to thinking differently or open to interpretation as we go along and sort of build our careers.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, the one thing I've had to really adopt, and one thing I always suggest people if they want to listen, is that you never hold too strongly to any of your ideals, because they will change. They should change, right? The one thing in this world that's constant is change. So if we just hold on to things too strongly and that becomes our identity, if we identify ourselves as a particular type of therapist or as a particular modality or intervention, then that becomes who we are, and we become very narrow-minded, and we see things through a very small lens. And I see that as that's a problem. I think if we could all identify as, like, you know what, maybe we have to think of an acronym for this, and then you can maybe market it as someone, like, I'm an evidence-based, less wrong therapist, like, which means you're constantly changing and evolving, then that's how we should all see ourselves, and that would be better for the profession, but better for the public as well. But I do agree with what you said earlier. It is a systemic problem. Like, there's a lot of stakeholders involved that have a lot invested time, energy, money into the system. Colleges, associations, schools, CE instructors. There's a lot of stuff invested into it. And so, a lot of people don't want to change, and they do kind of just, there's like, schools are business. If you can learn this stuff and get your license, that's all they care about. That's not all they should care about, but a lot of them, I'm painting them all with the same brush here. I know there are some schools that are not that way, but the majority of them are. And that's a problem, because they feed into mills. Puppy mills, so you said?
Diploma mills.
Oh, diploma mills. Sorry. Diploma mills.
Yeah.
Both terrible things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes,
so
exactly.
I guess one question is I would, because we probably should be wrapping this up soon. I mean, I feel like we could talk for days.
I know.
What about the program have you enjoyed? Because we're doing a lot of like bashing massage schooling, and that's not really the intention. It's more to kind of discuss it, but this happens. What about the things do you find that are good, if you have any?
Yeah, a little bit of a challenge to think about that, especially in my the third term, when I'm just so ready to be done. But definitely just the people that I've met and the friends that I've made in this program. That's definitely one of my highlights. I think this program, and I don't know about, the rest of Canada, but in my school anyways, it's the people that have been drawn into this program are a really cool, like, eclectic group of people who care, who truly care about others and about each other. And I think that when you're developing friendships in a situation like massage school, where you're so vulnerable with each other and, poking and prodding at each other's bodies every single day while you're just drowning in stress, these friendships kind of hit different a little bit. Like, you get close quickly. And I'm so thankful for that. And that has been really cool, because in my previous educations and jobs and whatever, I haven't experienced this at sort of this level of connection with people doing the same thing as me. which has been really neat. And the other thing that I'm really enjoying about the program is the neuroanatomy piece, like just getting an understanding of how the nervous system works and what it is and our impact on that. I wish actually there was more time spent on that. We don't get a lot of time with the nervous system, but for me, that's been probably the highlight of the program.
Nice. The friendship thing and the connection thing is something that I would say is only really understood by other massage therapists. Friends,
Yes.
colleagues, family, spouses that are not in the industry probably don't get it, because I mean, pretty much everybody I know that's gone to massage school, myself included, some of your closest friendships you've ever had or ever will have come from that, and from that shared kind of experience of being there. And yeah, you're in the school every day,
Every day.
like 6, 8 hours, 9 hours a day. You're studying on the weekends or after hours. You're stressing together. There is some level of, I don't know, intimacy is the right word, or connectiveness, where you're close to people, and you really create a lot of really good friendships. And some of my favorite friendships I still have are people I went to school with, almost 20 years ago. So it's something that is really, really important. I'm glad to hear you say that. But something I've found anyway, that other people that aren't in our industry, they don't get it.
Yeah. No. And we've had these conversations at school where this has been all consuming. It's like my life before here just got put on hold and has been just stuck on hold while I kind of get this done. And in learning this type of stuff, not only are you just learning what you're learning, you're having to learn a whole new language. You're having to learn how to pronounce words that you've never seen, like so many words that you've never seen before. And because of the complexities of anatomy and how the body works and stuff like that, after a month, you're so far into it that I felt like anyways, I can't even talk to my friends, my family about this, because it would take me an hour to even explain where I would want to get to tell them about this certain thing now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas with the people who are going through it with you, it's like, yeah, you're kind of in the trenches together a little bit.
It's a little bit of
shared.
It's a little bit of shared trauma almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it absolutely is. It's so stressful. I've never been so stressed in my in my life, but we're almost done. So
no, but you're almost done the program, which is great. And I'm sure it sounds like, I mean, you're I love to hear all the things that you're asking, all the things you're saying, and the questions that you're having is really encouraging. And that kind of stuff is going to serve you really well as a therapist. And I'm sure that you are going to take your learning journey to wherever it is going to be, and I'm sure you're going to influence others and try and make the world a better place, whether it's other therapists or the people that come to see you. I think is really great, because I think it sounds like from our conversation that you just want to be less wrong every day too. You just want to serve the people that come to see you as best you can without lying to them.
Totally. Absolutely. And I just feel like the learning is just beginning, which is kind of scary, but also exciting at the same time for a person who gets bored, me. I don't feel like I'm ever going to be bored in this. There's so much to learn, and there are so many different routes and avenues to go down in this industry, which is really cool. And I'm really excited about that. And despite the fact that the school piece may not have been my most favorite 2 years of my life, I am still so excited to be a massage therapist at the end of this. I love massage therapy. I've had, a billion of them. I just love it. I stand by them. You know what I mean? So I'm excited. I'm really, really excited to get out there and start working, and to figure out a way that works for me and my practice. Figure that out as time goes on. But yeah, I'm super stoked about it.
That's amazing. Yeah, and that's really, I'm really excited for you there, Courtney. Just to wrap up, what I wanted to, when we started today, you said that you kind of, after your first year, you started asking questions and you kind of went online looking for answers. Did you find any answers to any of the questions, or did you just only get more questions?
Yeah, I got some answers, because one of my questions was like, is this all bullshit? And some of it is, in fact, all bullshit. So yes, I got some answers, but for the most part, it just gave me 8 million more questions, which is cool because, I I like learning stuff. So for me, it works because I'm like, ooh, more things to learn. But yeah, I would say for the most part, it just opened more avenues for more questions, which I kind of think is how it's going to keep going, if I had to guess.
And I would support that statement. Yes, that's you'll just keep asking more questions, and you'll just keep get some answers, but you'll have more questions for those too. And that's just the way it is. And I think that's great. I guess one thing, if you wanted to share with the listeners, where else have you gone to get information from? So what kind of resources do you want to share, if any, of places you've gone to find things relevant to massage or helping your curiosity?
The biggest kind of one for me right off the hop was in like podcast land. Was going out and listening to other massage therapists who are already working and have been working in the industry for a long time. Some of you know what I mean? And that for me was sort of the jumping point. I then started using social media as a point of connection and like connecting with you. And I've connected with a couple other therapists in Canada who have been practicing for a while, to just ask them, hey, am I losing my brain right now, or is what I'm thinking valid? And the people that I have reached out to, none of who are actually in the Maritimes, most of them are in BC, but all of them have been so supportive and so kind in like my quest for knowledge, and have said, I'm here if you have any questions, and have offered me resources. So go check out this website, go check out that. So it's been kind of like a connect with somebody who then guides me a little bit towards their world of evidence and knowledge and their beliefs and stuff like that. And that's kind of where I'm at now. We'll see once I'm done school how that evolves and where I continue to get my information from. We'll hopefully kind of get more into reading the research myself and seeing what that feels like. Right now, that just feels way too overwhelming. I'm trying to get through this program. But for the most part, yeah, for me, it's been connecting with other manual therapists that exist, mostly in Canada for now, and kind of leaning on them. And I think while social media can definitely be a double-edged sword, that's a super cool thing that has come from it, to give me that opportunity to be able to chat with people who know what they're doing, because I have no clue at this point in my career. You know what I mean? So yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, it sounds like, the social media connections have led to a little bit of kind of just professional mentoring, where you're like, hey, like help you out. And I think it's great too. I get messages from people all the time, and usually very supportive. And I always want to see myself as a resource to help others as best I can. And because I know when I was on this journey, I felt like I was alone. I couldn't find anybody. And so I felt I was the only one out there asking questions, or looking for answers that I was looking for. And I think I just got lucky finding things the way I did. And I have always thought, man, I really freaking wish I had somebody else I could have, helped me along this journey. So I always try and put myself like, okay, if people are asking questions, they want to know this stuff, I'm always happy to answer questions or help as best I can, or direct them towards resources, because I know how beneficial and how nice that would have been for me. So
yeah, and like you said, it does feel a little bit lonely at the beginning. When I first started kind of questioning things in my head, I was like, is anybody else in here? Like, they would say something, I'm looking around the class, is anybody else thinking that this is like ludicrous? And it's no, everybody's sitting like, yeah, that sounds great. And I'm like, wait though. So I also felt a little bit alone, but as soon as I got online, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not alone. There are people who are already, 10, 20 years ahead of me thinking about these types of things, which gave me hope as well. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, yes, there can be changes made here. I don't know what that'll look like for me, and where I can fit into that. once I start getting out and practicing. But it's cool to see, because it does kind of give you hope that we can do something to make a change within the profession down the road.
Yeah. Change will happen, slow and steady, but these conversations are important, and hopefully people in Maritimes, and hopefully you can get some more people to listen to what you have to say, or they can listen to this podcast, and you can start to have these conversations. So, well, thanks very much, Courtney, for being here today. This was really fantastic. Maybe we'll have to bring you back again once you're finished, so you can tell us about your final part of your journey.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love to. This has been really awesome. Thank you for inviting me on here.
Yeah, thank you, and all the best to you, and good luck with your final term, and good luck with your exam, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe so you can be notified of all future episodes. Purvis Versus is available on all major podcast directories. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on all your social media platforms. If you'd like to connect with me, I can be reached through my website, ericpurvis.com, or send me a DM through either Facebook or Instagram. I can be found at Eric Purvis RMT.